So in an effort to continue to save money on the Christmas gifts I need to buy, I'm going to continue to weigh in on the 49ers broadcaster controversy who was suspended for stating that Lamar Jackson might have an advantage because the dark ball is camouflaged by his dark uniform and his dark skin color. So when I originally proposed this, I had a few comments. Bad take, dude. I was contacted by a couple of my lefty friends who told me that they cringed when I even discussed it or when they heard what the announcer originally stated. Now, let's diagnose this. I also have a solution to the ball controversy that I'm going to state in a second. First, let's analyze why there's a cringe factor. The fact is that the moment somebody says anything about somebody's skin color, especially if it's a darker skin tone, there is an immediate cringe factor because the assumption is that SJWs are going to come out of the woodwork with their hammers and try to cancel somebody, getting them suspended in this case, potentially fired, which there were calls for, or ostracized, or just make their life a living hell. So, of course, there is naturally, when this is done time and time again, there's an automatic cringe factor the moment somebody says something remotely controversial. That's unfortunately the reality because this stymies free speech. Free speech, of course, is the mechanism by which we solve our differences in society in a peaceful manner. And by essentially trying to squash the First Amendment by passing hate speech laws. In Canada recently, a comedian was fined $35,000 after a court upheld an initial ruling that he should have to pay for making fun of somebody who might have been disabled in his audience. $35,000 for making a joke. This is anti-free speech. These are the hate speech laws that are being passed where we have to cater to the lowest common denominator of society. Because the moment that an ego, however small, feels that it was infringed upon, this is the line that we draw. The moment somebody's offended, you can't even be a comedian and make fun of somebody. This is a killing of comedy. This is squashing the First Amendment without actually repealing it. And that's why we have to stand up to the monsters that are attempting to do so in the name of compassion. So once again, when you're discussing this football-related question, whether or not Lamar Jackson actually holds an advantage by being able to camouflage the ball, giving him a split second of defensive indecision as to who to go after, and then that stud is off to the races because he's faster than anybody else on the field to begin with, giving him that advantage whether or not it is actually leveling the playing field. Let me ask you this. If you had a snowstorm and white uniforms and a white ball and two albinos faking handoffs to each other, would it be more difficult to tell who had the ball than in the same snowstorm with that white ball and black athletes with dark uniforms? Which is there a greater contrast where that split second of indecision will be less likely to exist? The answer is obvious, and it's a question that is worthy of discussion. So again, if we just stay quiet and let Lamar, who is more talented than just about anybody on the field to begin with, have an additional advantage, we do not have a level playing field, and that becomes the question. And that's why we have to raise the initial point. We have to be able to discuss this. And this is the problem that I see with the squashing of free speech or free expression. When people are cringing at the slightest provocation, at the slightest mention of what is a fair intellectual discussion, this is where free speech, as a society, we are attempting to squash what is protected by law in our First Amendment, which doesn't hold true in Canada, as I just mentioned, doesn't hold true in Great Britain, where hate speech laws, if you say something offensive on social media, they can potentially throw you in jail / fine you. This goes against English common law that's been unearthed, that is the bedrock of our democracy, free speech. So here is my solution to the controversy. Why don't we make the ball orange? That way nobody has an advantage. A bright orange colored ball makes it harder to camouflage against a uniform and skin color that are not traditionally orange. The question is, again, is the playing field level? And should we be able to discuss this openly, because again, Tim Ryan, the 49ers broadcaster, has of course issued an apology. He wants his job back. He's got a great job. And the moment that people are offended, that the radio station takes action upon their behalf, he has to apologize. And of course, this just drives free expression down a level. It makes it harder and harder to speak up. So now's the time that we have to speak up in order to kill the monster while it's sort of little, before it continues to grow into this cancer that envelops and kills the First Amendment. And again, if people can say that it is white privilege to have a Band-Aid that is the same skin color because it camouflages the wound, and that the Band-Aids don't come in skin tones for black people, and that's white privilege, then how can we not discuss whether or not having a ball where you gain a small advantage in a multi-million-dollar contract, is it not fair to discuss whether it yields an advantage? And we have to be free to discuss it without being canceled, without people being outraged over the slightest thing. And this is what I stand for. So hopefully, if you guys have thoughts, feel free to leave it in the comments. And, if this saves me a few extra bucks in Christmas presents, well, so be it. Everybody's a winner. Peace and blessings to everybody out there. Cheers.